Evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Ben Sutcliffe. If you don't know, I'm a wildlife travel consultant for Wildlife Worldwide, as well as a photography leader at Wildlife Worldwide and the Traveling Naturalist. So tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Helen Bryon, who's going to be talking to us about South America's big cats. I'm lucky enough to have gone to both of these places, so I'm sure the presentation will be as amazing as what we're expecting. So we're expecting the talk to be around 45 minutes with a short, fingers crossed, we'll see, HA, 45 minutes and then a short Q&A at the end. So as ever, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat at the bottom or the Q&A box, and then we'll come to them at the end. Yeah, I think that's everything. So right over to you, HB. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ben. Right, okay, hi everybody. Thank you as always for giving up your evening to listen to me blather on about South America and of course my love for big cats of all shapes and sizes. Right, so South America's big cats. Wow, we are going to start with jaguars. Of course, we have jaguars and pumas on the continent, and with regards to jaguars, these are monster cats. They are huge. Leopards on steroids is how they were described to me by my boss, Dan, when I first went out in 2018. I was expecting leopard behavior. My word, was I wrong on that. These are bold, these are brazen, these are magnificent cats. They are huge. They are active by day and by night. The little spots that you can see within each rosette is another differentiating factor between them and leopards. They love the water, and we will see them skulk, we will see them stalk. And on my very first visit back in 2018, I saw 16 different individuals over 24 sightings on a 4-night stay in what is known as the Jaguar Zone. And that, believe it or not, is by no means unusual. So these guys are fabulous to watch. They give me goosebumps. This is a gorgeous picture by my colleague Emma Healy. So Ben leads trips out here, I lead trips out here, Emma does, so does Brett. Quite a few of our in-house tour leaders have had the great fortune to spend quite a bit of time in the area. And of course, jaguars are found across the continent. They're found from Central America all the way down. You can go to Guyana, you can go to Colombia, you could go to Costa Rica, and you could be incredibly lucky and come across a jaguar. But if there is one place that you have to go to absolutely maximize your chance of seeing these magnificent cats, then really you're going to make a beeline for Brazil's Pantanal. It's just an overnight flight away. Once you're through Sao Paulo Airport, and what a joy that always is, you have two access points. In the north, you have Cuiabá, and in the south, you have Campo Grande. And the north and the south, my job this evening is essentially to talk you through the differences between the two before we then venture further south still into puma country. So sticking with jaguars initially, we're going to start with the North Pantanal. This is by far and away the most reliable area that we would send you to if jaguars were top of your wish list. It's only a couple of hours by flight from Sao Paulo. There are a couple of flights a day that will take you straight into Cuiabá. From there, it is a tar road to a little town called Paine. And from Paine, we venture south into the Pantanal itself, indicated in blue on this biome map of Brazil. we head down towards an area called Porta Joffre, and that is slap bang in the heart, and it's the access point to the jaguar zone. Now, essentially from Kiev to Paine, as I've mentioned, it's a tar road. From Paine down to Porta Joffre, you have one road. So there's one access in and there's one access out, and that's it. And that is the Trans-Pantanera, which is a gravel road covering 150 kilometers. And the very start of it, it's almost a rite of passage that you disembark your air-conditioned minibus and you take your photo underneath this sign that marks the very start of the Trans-Pantanera. Once you've had your photo taken, once you have moved into our open-sided, elevated vehicle through which we travel down and back up the Trans-Pantanera, it is dusty. You can see that. So you do need to be aware of that and keep your cameras and your binoculars covered as a result, let alone your eyes. The bus is a good call. But from our elevated position, as we start to move down the Trans-Pantanera, literally the magic begins at the word go. And what's so exciting, this is elevated because this is a massive wetland flood area. A lot of it is inaccessible during the rainy season, so our trips tend to operate between June and late October. And the reason for the elevation is simply because on either side of you in the wet season, it's just going to be floodland. And that is going to attract a huge amount of animal and wildlife activity, especially birds. As you go down the Trans-Pantanera, you start to see wildlife. You might come across jaguar spoor. You might come across agouti, coati. You might come across teira, in this case, a crab-eating fox. In addition to that, you're going to get flashes of colour as the most glorious roseate spoonbills do flybys over the marshes. The later in the season you go, the drier it tends to be. So these marshy areas on either side of the Trans-Pantanera, the water will begin to diminish, but we are always moving in a southerly direction down towards Porta Joffre, which is at the start of the jaguar zone on the river. Until then, you've just got to keep your eyes peeled. As you go down the Trans-Pantanera from that initial road sign, at various kilometre intervals down the Trans-Pantanera will be a number of lodges. As we make our way to our first lodge, we use a number of them, we will start to head over some of the 120 bridges, civil engineering right here, and you can see the water below. You can peer over the side and get some fantastic photographic opportunities like my lovely colleague Helen did, or HC as she's known internally. This is one of her wonderful pictures. These are Yakari caiman. And one thing that I was absolutely not prepared for is the sheer numbers in which you will find them. You will find hundreds in one spot with a lone capybara in the middle of them. The capybaras you'll start to see more regularly. They're always dotted around the water, scent marking around the edge, sitting there looking worldly wise and utterly adorable with their little pink bellies. You'll start to see neotropical cormorants. You'll start to see kingfishers. There's so much water here that these water birds, ibis, you're going to get the wonderful patterning of sunbittens. They look so nondescript when they're walking along the shore. When they open their mouths, they have a wonderful call, but when they fly, that's when the magic starts again. These incredible patterns that they have on their wings. From the calls of southern screamers up in the tops of the trees around you to piping guans and beautiful, beautiful whistling herons, capped herons. Just look at the colours on this thing. If you don't think you're into birds, think again. Even the vultures are beautiful. And I particularly love the bad-haired days that you get. The birds here are so accessible because they're just so wonderful. They're wild, they're loud, they're Oh, they're brilliant. So all of this is really epitomizing what you might see as you travel down the Trans-Pantanera, but also waiting for you at the other end. So the bird life is sublime. Now, coming back to these lodges that can be located down the Trans-Pantanera, a lot of them are old ranches. Some of them are still working ranches. There is an eco plan or a business model, if you like, for want of a better word. Almost 97% of the Pantanal is actually privately owned, and it's used predominantly for cattle ranching. As a result, jaguars, until relatively recently, were seen as the scourge of business, if you like, because of course they would take off the pickings, and that would affect your overhead margin. What is now coming to light is that ecotourism is hugely valuable. It's maintaining and preserving areas of the Pantanal, and it can work alongside cattle farming. So don't be surprised if one minute you're looking at about 100 caiman at your feet, and the next minute there's a herd of cattle being corralled through it by men on horseback. But these lodges generally have quite a lot in common. They're generally very simple. They're usually single story. They will have terracotta tiled roofs, and they will be surrounded in some element. There will be access to water, whether it's these marshy areas that you can see here, or whether it is actually a river. All of this water is going to attract wildlife. So at this particular lodge, for example, I've sat in this pool and I've had capybara walking all around me. In the morning, your dawn chorus is going to be, you don't need an alarm clock, put it that way. It is staggering. And all of these lodges have the most gorgeous feeders attracting curassows and turco-toucans like you've got here, cardinals, birds in all shapes and sizes and colours. And then during the day, we'll usually have a couple of days here at the start of the trip at one of these various lodges along the Trans-Pantanera, just to help you get over the journey and to provide an introduction to the Pantanal. Some of them, as I say, will have access to rivers and to lagoons, and we might head out on the water in very, very comfortable, but again, just very simple boats where we're at eye level and we can begin to get some wonderful photographs and try to capture the area. So whether it's the herons that we're looking at, rufescent tiger heron hunting as we've got here, one of the big sort of ticks, if you're a birder, would be this agami heron, again, successfully fishing here. We might just sit by the water at our lodge and we might just wait to see what comes down. This is another one of Emma Healy's lovely photos. And we've got, the capacity to just sit there at ground level with Yakari caiman and take some fantastic photographs of them. This one with a bit of a hairdo that's quite impressive. And also some of the smaller bits and bobs that may be buzzing around you. So the birds, the bugs, the bees. It's a nice opportunity just simply to relax into the extravaganza that is a Pantanal wildlife holiday. Some of the lodges will have viewing platforms. The viewing platform in this case is currently occupied by an ibis, but this is actually there so that you can get up close and personal with jabiru stork. Their nests are always very high, so by building a platform, you can get at eye level and potentially see chicks being reared in the nest, which is really quite special. Never mind your vertigo, just don't look down. But we might go out on a dusk safari. It might be on foot, it might be by vehicle, and there's potential that we might come across tapir, the largest land mammal in South America. There's a number of different types of deer species, from pampas to brocket. You just never know what you're going to come across. And as the sun sets on another day on the Trans-Pantanera, you can take advantage of the light conditions to capture your capybara, to capture another rufescent tiger heron. These are incredibly picturesque and photogenic subjects. It might be as the colours begin to fade into night that you can do some sort of this silhouette photography. And then after dark falls, fireflies, the sounds of the night, bats potentially, And one of the lodges at which we stay has actually got an ocelot hide, giving you the opportunity. It's baited. There are a number of branches into which little bits of meat are put, and if you're lucky, the ocelot will come and again provide you with some fantastic photo opportunities. There are, of course, opportunities to potentially come across ocelot where in a more natural environment. So big cats, small cats, they're all along the Trans-Pantanera. What you might come across is just sitting at the lodge, like my colleague Helen did, sit at the lodge, tiger rat snake. Just there we are, found on one of the chairs at the lodge. So sometimes the wildlife will come to you, which is just fantastic. So you can just immerse yourself really for your first couple of days of your trip into the new environment, get your bush eyes on. But after 2 or 3 nights, of course, there's going to be one thing on your mind, and one thing only, and that's these beautiful, beautiful creatures. So it's time for us to hit the river. We need to get down to Porto Jofre at the very bottom of the Trans-Pantanera. We want the jaguar zone, and this is what we're hoping to come across. In the water, on the beaches, as we arrive into Porto Jofre, quite often our groups are lucky enough to come across hyacinth macaw, which is another big tick if you're a birder. Even if you're not a birder, you can't fail to be impressed and slightly just bemused at the bickering between these creatures. They're really, really rather wonderful. So on this map, you can see Kieba up in the top right-hand side, the tar road that takes you down to Paine that you can see on the map there. And then there are a number of triangles along the Trans-Pantanera down as far as Porto Jofre. And those triangles signify just a few of the lodges that we're able to utilise on our way down and potentially on the way back up as well. Once we get to Porto Jofre, though, this is where we're going to be looking for the hyacinth macaws, and it's from here that we're going to take to the water. Leave the vehicle behind us. We're going to get into our boats, into our low motorised boats, and we are going to hit the river. And every safari for the next couple of days is going to be from a boat. Now, the area that you can see from Porto Jofre, if you look sort of towards the, say, 2 o'clock from Porto Jofre, you can see that there is a green area called the Meeting of the Waters State Park. What you're about to see is an oval that will come over that area, and this is basically signifying what is known as the jaguar zone. So there is potential to see jaguars as you come down the Trans-Pantanera, but by and large, in our experience, it's not until you hit that jaguar zone that your chances increase massively. Now, at Porto Jofre itself, because this is the access at the end of the road and the access point to the river, it can get quite busy. And it wouldn't be unusual in the height of the season, which just as a reminder is between June and October, it wouldn't be unusual to have potentially 10, 15, even 20 boats on the river like this, all on one sighting. Now the guides self-police. Earlier in the season, when there are fewer visitor numbers, it's slightly cooler, be about 20, 25 degrees. The temperatures increase as we move towards September, October, and then they could be in the 30s, high 30s. So earlier in the season, when there are fewer visitor numbers, we often use a hotel right at Porto Jofre, Hotel Pantanal Norte. It's very simple, but its location is absolutely key. What we tend to do otherwise is we actually prefer to stay about 30 to 40 kilometres upstream from Porto Jofre. What that means is that we are in usually an old sort of fishing lodge that has been reutilised into ecotourism purposes. They're usually very small, they're usually very simple, and we stay upstream away from Porto Jofre in the hope that as we traverse the channels around the lodge, we won't have anybody else traversing that area with us. So it wouldn't be unheard of to have sightings of jaguars and other things to ourselves. And that's basically the theory behind why we stay away from Porta Joffre more often than not. But Porta Joffre does have its place, and earlier in the season, we're more than happy to stay. And we're close enough that if there are more sightings down in that busier Porta Joffre area, which makes sense, more eyes, more sightings, we're close enough that we can go and join them if we want to. But as we hit the river, this is really now the waterborne creatures that are going to start to take centre stage. The caiman are fantastic. The capybara are fantastic. We're going to come across skimmers, terns. We're going to come across, hopefully, jaguars. Look at the light on this particular individual. They walk along the river banks. The roots that you can see behind this jaguar are more exposed. The later in the season you go, the water levels drop, and therefore these beaches can be exposed. You'll get jaguars walking along them, the colours for caiman in the water. And as our days in this area sort of begin, we might be presented with a ferruginous pygmy owl first thing in the morning, you never know. We might be woken up by howler monkeys. There's a whole supporting cast of wildlife here. Not everything that we've already discussed, they're also down here on the river. So your roseate spoonbills and all your waders and all your herons. But the howler monkeys, it's a haunting way to wake up. We're out on the river early doors, we go back to the lodge for lunch, and then we're out again in the afternoon. Life and death is played out in front of us, as it always is on safari. Yet another rufescent tiger heron, but really this is what we're looking for, the king of its jungle. We are looking for jaguars, and we're going to be doing so all day, every day, and we hope that on most of your outings you're going to come across wonderful sightings. Sometimes they hunt right in front of you. We had one that basically literally in front of our boat reared up, launched itself into the water, came up with a caiman in its jaws. Sometimes they're resting, sometimes they're with young. Usually they're solitary, but there is also, there's a known coalition of brothers that are seen quite regularly. But the beauty of these animals as well is that they're very, very proficient in the water. And with caiman being their preferred prey, capybara to an extent as well. Capybara, when spooked, will basically head into the water, go underneath, and they will swim. But the jaguars will follow them. This is also probably the best place in the world from which to search for giant river otter. So jaguar, giant river otter, two wonderful reasons to visit. This one munching down on a yellow anaconda, and this one on a fish. They're again, incredibly photogenic subjects. They make a racket as well. They really squabble amongst themselves, but there's a capacity to see them out of the water, resting on branches. In addition to that, my word, this is probably one of my most wanted animals in terms of seeing it in the future. Tree porcupine, absolutely glorious. They're not a common sighting, but they are seen on some of our trips. And what an utterly adorable present or picture that actually is. We'll be looking for tapir. We'll be looking for the little things that you might not at first glance spot. This is another one of Emma Healy, Queen of the Macros shots, and of these bats. And you often see them just above the waterline as you're perusing through and gliding through these waters. Green iguanas, basically trying to avoid predation but warm up in the sun. The antics of raptors, there's a whole from snail kites through to, this is a black-shouldered hawk. Again, the birding is just hugely accessible. Chestnut-eared aracari, you've got a yellow chevron parakeet. I mean, how cute is this little one? Wood rails feasting on the remnants of a fish left behind, and adorable gatherings of Gira cuckoo. These literally have to have one of the best hairstyles in the Pantanal. I absolutely love them. So ultimately, our aim, whilst we're in the jaguar zone, and we normally aim to spend 4 nights in the jaguar zone on our trip, or on most of our trips, our ultimate aim is, of course, to find you jaguar and to find you as many as we possibly can. So that's the North Pantanal, really. Kieba, tar road to Paine, all the way down to Porto Jofre, over the 150-kilometre long Trans-Pantanera, the gravel elevated road with all those bridges, all those photo opportunities. So if that trip appeals, essentially what you need to be looking for on our website or contacting us for more information about is our Wildlife of the Pantanal holiday. It's a 2-week trip. We have frequent departures that start in June and work all the way through to October. Currently, the group size is 12, and we have dates in place for next year and also for 2026. But that's only half the story, because I've not talked about the South Pantanal yet. And we're doing all right, 25 minutes in, and I'm 1 down. This is good. Okay, so the South Pantanal. There are no roads linking the north and the south. Porto Jofre is literally the bottom of the access point by road from the north. So from Sao Paulo, we fly you in and out of Campo Grande in order to then drive 4 or 5 hours into the southern Pantanal region. There are a number of roads in this region. There's not just one in and one out like we've seen with the Trans-Pantanera. And the lodges are really split up in this area. They are quite far apart. So trying to incorporate more than perhaps one lodge in the South Pantanal does involve quite a lot of travel. It could be 3, 4, or even 5 hours worth of road transfer. So usually if you're going to the South Pantanal, you're going to go to one area and one lodge only. Far fewer visitors make it to the south. There are jaguars in the south. Your chances of seeing them in the south are slim, with one exception, which I'll come back to later. So why go to the south? Well, it's for perhaps the most wondrous, weird animal that ever graced this planet. This is the domain of giant anteater. They are wonderful. They are just strange. Their sight is dreadful. However, they have these shaggy coats, incredibly elongated nose with a huge tongue that comes out the other end. They are just wonderful, wonderfully strange creatures. They use that sense of smell, that hugely concentrated sense of smell, to sniff out the termites and the ants that they so love. And if you look at this one scratching its nose, just look at those claws. They are formidable weapons with which they will begin to break into termite mounds. They carry their babies on their back. Because of those claws, they have to walk on their knuckles, essentially, as they walk through the more open grassland that characterizes the South Pantanal. As a result, the baby climbs up onto the back because they can't lift the baby onto the back, and will stay with its mum while it's learning the ropes, so to speak. And if you're lucky enough to come across these creatures, particularly with a baby on the back, it's utterly, utterly endearing. You may also come across their cousins, tamanduas, who carry their young in a similar vein. The more open element of the South Pantanal lends itself to a variety of creatures. Much of the bird life is the same as you will come across in the north, but you will also come across red-legged seriemas like you've got here. This I always think of as South America's answer to Africa's secretary bird. You'll come across burrowing owls. Again, they use that open grassland area, little mounds, and they perch on the top, and often on fence posts as the way. You may come across peccary. You may come across the gloriously, another endearing creature, armadillos, whether it's a 6-banded, a 9-banded, a 3-banded, they're here and they are bruisers. They scoot through the bush at great speed. Often all you see is a flash and then you realize, oh my God, that was an armadillo. But they are utterly, they just transfix you. They are fabulous. They're absolute little heart stealers. So if you like the idea of giant anteater being your key subject in the South Pantanal with that supporting cast, and also the opportunity of going to the north and seeing the jaguars in the river as well as all those other creatures, well then it's the wildlife of the North and South Pantanal that you're going to want to have a look at. We offer departures once a year only with this particular trip. It's led by a local guide, Miguel, who is a font of knowledge. He's a superb birder, so there's really good birding potential on here. And this is more of an all-round wildlife focus. The wildlife of the Pantanal trip that I talked through previously, jaguars really are the draw card for that. Here we spend time in the south first, so giant anteaters we hope, plus all the birding. Then we move up to the Trans-Pantanera for a couple of nights, and then down to Porto Jofre for a couple of nights. And we spend 2 full days out on the river looking for the jaguars from there. So that's how that trip differentiates itself. We have another trip that also combines the north and the south on a small group basis, and it's our photographic safari. This is led by Ben, it's led by Emma, it's led by Brett in rotation. So Brazil's Big 5 photo safari, the Big 5, hyacinth macaw, tapir, giant anteater, jaguar, and there's always one that evades me, but it will come back to me, don't worry. It will be the giant river otter. Thank you. Good job I have my notes just in front of me. So Brazil's Big 5 photo safari every October next year. And then from the following year, we have a lot of demand for this trip. So we're spreading it out across a few months. So there will be departures offered between June and September. And because it's photographic, it's a very small group, up to 6 people, I believe. So again, we head to the Trans-Pantanera, we go down into the jaguar zone. From Kirba, we fly to the south, and we then spend a few nights in Benito. One other thing that sets this particular trip apart is the fact that, yes, you've got the photographic know-how, so your leaders will take you through the shrubbery at night in order to find images like this. They will go out with their UV torches to find you scorpions in the trees. But also this trip will visit a real highlight of the South Pantanal. About an hour outside Benito, we have a little spot called Buraco das Araras, which is a sinkhole that actually used to be a rubbish tip, would you believe? Until it was bought, all the rubbish was removed and some macaw pairs moved in. Largely red and green macaws, but there is one solo blue and yellow for some unknown reason. And being a sinkhole, the macaws actually fly at eye level with you and also beneath you, which means that the photographic opportunities are absolutely fantastic. Now, on the trip that I lead out to Brazil, we also visit the South Pantanal and also the macaw sinkhole. But what we do in addition is we start off the trip in the Cerrado, which is the Brazilian savanna. We move on to the southern Amazon for a rainforest immersive experience, and then we come down to the South Pantanal. We stay in super lodges all the way. There's a lot of traveling, but we spend 4 nights in each of these biomes, plus a few logistical travel nights. So the Cerrado, our key species that we're looking for, is the wonderfully enigmatic maned wolf. The Amazon, absolutely stunning. That's just everything. It's the experience. And then we come down to the southern Pantanal, where we stay at the wonderful Cayman Lodge. And Cayman is slightly different to all of the lodges that we deal with in the south. It's larger, it's far more international, rather than just being a converted, lovely sort of small ranch type property. This is almost a purpose-built, very plush, very lovely property. But the difference with Cayman, we will be actively looking for jaguars, even though we're in the South Pantanal. So we'll be looking for giant anteater, tamandua, hyacinth macaw, all of the above. But here there is an NGO called On Safari who have been working very, very closely with jaguars, habituating them to ecotourism, more along the lines of an African model. So we go out in safari vehicles, like you can see here. The two vehicles on the end are Cayman vehicles, and On Safari have these rather animal print sort of vehicles there in the middle. So this Cayman Lodge is where we will actively look for jaguars in the South Pantanal, as well as all of the other wildlife that's on offer. So really, just to kind of sum that up, if you want jaguars in the river, on the river, by the beach, walking along the banks, you need to go north. So the North Pantanal will give you opportunities like this. The South Pantanal, you're in a vehicle, as you would be African styly. If it's jaguars that you're looking for, you'll go to Cayman Lodge. And this is an image that I took last year, for example, of a wonderful female, the last one that we saw on our 4 nights there. And she just walked right in front of us, not a care in the world. She was looking for a bit of alone time. She'd left her cub in a field next door, and she was glorious. So for the river, North Pantanal. For the more open grassland areas, giant anteaters, fewer people, go to the south. And if you particularly are looking for jaguars in the south as well, you need to go to Cayman Lodge. So, had enough? Bored? Fed up with jaguars? Fed up with big cats? I don't think so. Why not combine some jaguar spotting with some puma spotting? And at this point, Ben goes, oh, yes, please, because he leads the very trip that actually enables our clients to do just that. So if you want to see jaguars and you want to see pumas in the same trip, stay tuned. Right, so I have wanted to see pumas for years and years and years. I saw puma prints the first time I went to Torres, which is this wonderful national park in southern Chile, in the year 2000. I was then booked to go during COVID. Clearly that didn't happen. But earlier this year, I was fortunate enough to spend a month in Patagonia. And with clients, we were able to see pumas on both groups. So, crikey, they are beautiful, beautiful animals. I want to take that picture. I want to see that scene. Look at them. They are just inquisitive. They're bold. They look stroppy. I know I seem to say this every time I talk about pumas, but they don't have soft eyes, but I think that's rather marvellous. They live in a pretty damn hostile environment, so they're tough, these creatures. So usually solitary. However, obviously, if they're bringing up their young, then you will see more than one together. There is actually a train of thought that's quite interesting that seems to basically, when you look at early settler diaries from a few hundred years ago, pumas were often seen cooperatively hunting. And then as time has gone on, they have become more and more solitary. Whether that is a reaction to more human encroachment, who knows? But certainly the first group that I visited with in March this year, we saw 2 females, an adult female, a younger adult female that we learnt was actually her daughter, and they were on a kill together. And we knew that the older female had new cubs stashed away that she would likely have brought out to that kill after dark. So who knows? Maybe lions are not the only solitary cat, or social cat even. Sorry, engage brain, H. Anyway, look at these. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And they are the apex predator in their environment. I'm not sure I'd want to bump into this one on a cold winter's night. Stunning, stunning shot. So the apex predator, and by and large, this is their favoured prey. Another gorgeous creature. This is a guanaco that we spent about an hour watching back in March. And he went to chase off another male that just happened to come too close to him. There was a puma that had been watching him for about 3 hours, and we were hoping the puma was going to go for this particular guanaco. Didn't. So this guanaco is looking a lot happier, had a lucky escape compared to this one, unfortunately. But everything's got to eat. So interestingly, you can see inside the belly of this particular guanaco, there's vegetation. This is what pumas do. After they make a kill, they don't have to hide their kill from other predators. There are no hyena, there are no leopards that are going to come and steal off lions and so on like you'd get in Africa. So they stash their kill within vegetation and then they keep coming back to it. So it's probably just to keep away other pumas, really. But where are we talking? Where have we got to go to see these fabulous, fabulous big cats? You can see the environment is quite different to how you normally picture big cat country. Hot, dry, here we're talking a completely different kettle of fish. We're pretty much at the end of the world, right down in the very, very far south of Chile is a national park called Torres del Paine that you can see my cursor. It's just across the border from Argentina, and we are pretty south, as you can see. We're in line on the same latitude as the Falkland Islands. Now, Torres is part of the Patagonian ice sheet. So the north and the western side of Torres is completely icebound. So therefore, you can traverse the south and you can traverse the east. And Torres is essentially this massive granite uplift. This particular view is called Los Cuernos, the horns of Torres. If you can again just see where my cursor is, there are a number of quite distinctive peaks that I'm circling here. These are the horns of the area, and the cloudscapes that, we are at the end of the world. We're talking extremes in terms of climate. Rarely is it going to get above 20 degrees on a hot, hot summer's day. In winter, -20 is a distinct possibility. Let's say we're averaging about -3, -5, but the wind chill here can be considerable. But because of that wind, the cloudscape changes, the colors change, the light changes constantly. And as a result, Torres del Paine is regularly voted in the top 10 most beautiful national parks on the planet. It's home to Andean condor. You should see quite a few on a visit here. These are monster birds. They're absolutely huge with that lovely white neck ruff as they soar the areas around. At the other end of the scale, you've got torrent ducks that are basically facing raging glacial waters, melting waters. And so we always are searching for these as we pass rivers during our stay. Flashes of colour from woodpeckers, from austral parakeets, from Chilean flamingos like you've got here. Charming antics of rheas. Not so charming when you consider that the male actually has a sacrificial egg, if that is the right expression. What a male rhea does is when he's incubating the eggs and he realizes they're about to hatch, he will basically peck a hole into one of them. That means that the chick inside that egg is going to die, but when all of the others hatch, they will feed on that and they will therefore get stronger, which is, an unusual survival tactic. You will have Colpeo foxes, you will have grey foxes, you might come across hognose skunk. There's all sorts of wildlife to be seen here, despite the hostility of the environment. Now, the actual towers themselves, after which the national park is named, are here. They're visible from the southeastern side of the park. So these are the Torres, or the towers of Paine. Now, the tallest one is 2,800 meters above sea level. And if you look around it, it literally, this massif just rises up and it is visible, cloud cover permitting, from a long, long way away. This was actually our very first sighting, or first sighting as we entered the national park boundary back in March of this year. We were spectacularly lucky with the weather. We could see the whole massif, which is quite unusual. And this particular lake is called Sarmiento. Now, Sarmiento is also the name of a very, very famous puma, a very successful puma. She's reared a number of cubs. And she's been the subject of a number of TV documentaries. So Sarmiento Lake is a wonderful sort of access point, and the lore, as in LORE, of the area, the allure of the whole area is just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And your eyes are on stalks. As you come up the eastern side of the granite massif, you get these incredible photographic opportunities. Now, within the national park itself, there are strict regulations on where you can and where you can't go. You are by and large restricted to staying on the road, and therefore, if the wildlife is visible close to the road, you will get some lovely shots like this. Sometimes you can go off on paths with rangers, but generally you are restricted to wildlife viewing from the road. So if the wildlife is in close proximity, you can get some lovely, lovely sightings. Or you might end up needing a telephoto lens in order to get closer to your subject, or you could do something altogether different. This is a zoomed in image of Google Maps showing initially the main central granite area that falls within the outline that has just appeared on your map. It's a big hiking destination, this. So traditionally, people have always visited between October and March, April, which is spring, summer, autumn in the Austral areas. Excuse me, you can see the ice of the ice sheet to the west, to the north, and Lake Sarmiento, you can see, is down where my cursor is moving in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So it's a little bit like Africa. You have a national park, and then surrounding a national park will often be privately owned reserves. And on the privately owned reserves, the landowner can determine what you can and can't do. So in a national park, you stay on the road, you don't go off-road, you have to be in and out by the opening and the closing times. Whereas on the private reserves that neighbour it, you can go off-road potentially, you can walk potentially. There's a little bit more flexibility. And that's exactly what's happening here in Torres. So within the national park, strict regulations, but outside the national park, and the boundary has just come up on the right-hand side of your screen here, to the right of that boundary line is privately owned land, and to the left is the national park. Lago Sarmiento, which I'm also highlighting with my cursor, is where that image was previously taken, the first view over the lake, of course, also the name of that puma that is very well known. So that area around Lake Sarmiento is privately owned, and we do work with the estancia there. So we can offer both the chance to see what we can find in the national park and also to see what we can find in the private estancia, where we can go off-road and where we can walk. So obviously this is what we're looking for, and they are incredibly well camouflaged, ridiculously well camouflaged, but there is nothing to stop them just striding right out in front of you. Sometimes like this. This was one that we saw back in March, just literally sitting on the end of the road, or on the edge of the road, about 50 meters away, glorious, glorious male overlooking a turquoise glacial lake. Oh my word, it was absolutely stunning. There is nothing to stop them walking right across your path. It does happen. But if you want to ensure that you can try, well, as much as we can when working with wildlife, to try and get closer, then the national park remains the national park, but we then need to come into these private estancias. That's something that wildlife photographer Nick Garbett, that we work very closely with, one of our colleagues, he uses the estancia and he uses it regularly because it gives you opportunities like this. Ben has been to this estancia, he's also experienced this, and it means that you can drive as close as you can to a sighting, you can then get out and walk, and you can potentially walk as close as this. Nick Garbett also prefers to visit this area in winter. Those glorious crisp skies, ease of tracking an animal, but more so the light and the photographic opportunity. So these are some of his images. Just look how different it is. It looks absolutely epic. Long-tailed meadowlarks, they just pop with colour at that time of year. But we can offer this estancia any time of year. We can offer it on a tailor-made basis. We're including it in one of my trips, which is pumas and orcas, that I'm going to come on to now. So you've got lots of opportunity. Let me just go back one, sorry. Oh, forward, oops, I don't know what I'm doing. So Torres del Paine is down here, bottom of the peninsula. There is another peninsula, the continent. There is a peninsula here on the Atlantic side called the Peninsula Valdez, and we basically offer a trip that combines pumas in Torres del Paine with the chance to look for hunting orca off the Peninsula Valdez. And this is where they've been recorded on natural history programs extraordinaire, intentionally stranding, which means that they are essentially putting their life on the line to surf at high tide onto beaches, potentially get stuck, but they will grab sea lions and at different times of year, potentially young elephant seals as well. So essentially, we've got tailor-made that we can do. We've got Big Cats of South America photography safari that will combine jaguars and also pumas. We've got Chile's rare mammals, which is a fantastic trip that looks for blue whales. It looks for Darwin's fox. It comes down the length of Chile, searching for weird and wonderful and rare creatures. So in a nutshell, we're almost there. Hurrah, you say. If you want to see South America's big cats, you need to go to the Pantanal for jaguars. Wildlife of the Pantanal is the trip that we offer the most departures on, frequent departures between the dry season months of June to October. We have wildlife of the north and south, which combines both areas of the Pantanal. Does what it says on the tin. I don't even know why I'm reiterating that. We've got our Big 5 photo safari, which also goes to the north and south Pantanal, but you will have the accompanying pleasure of a wildlife photographer, might be Ben, and you have South America's Big Cats photography special, which combines puma watching initially with jaguars, and that definitely will be with Ben, so that's very exciting. Finally, almost finally, we have Patagonia's Pumas and Orcas, the group trip that I have the fortune to lead. That goes every March. And then we also have Chile's rare mammals, plus the Nick Garbett trips. He does the Pantanal and he does the pumas. So essentially, there's a plethora of choice. Too much for me to do any more on because I've already gone over my allotted 45 minutes, but only by 10. So I'm quite pleased with that. So we will welcome back Mr. Ben. Have you had some dinner?
I've had a wonderful time watching your brilliant talk.
Oh, crikey. So yes, so if we have any questions, we can ask them away. And then Ben is also just launching a poll. We can only get 6 travel plans on a poll. So that's why we can't include all of them on there, but you can always contact us if you want any more information about any of the trips. So please fill your boots, click away. Right, have we got any questions then?
We haven't just yet, so if you want to get your questions in, please do so. You annoyingly you covered the questions that I had. So, but yeah, no, it was a wonderful talk. Thank you, H. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I've been lucky enough to travel to both of these places, and you brought it to life. So yeah, wonderful.
Excellent. Okay, so if people have requested the travel plans and if there are no further questions, you can always contact us tomorrow. I'm just going to try and move the presentation onto the very last slide, you'll be pleased to know. So yes, if this has whetted your appetite, we have got £100 off per person if you would like to go to see the big cats of South America. And then Ben, yeah, I don't know if you want to introduce Brett for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so after this talk on the 30th of October at the same time at 7:30, we have a talk about Nagaholi with the wonderful Brett Charman, who's one of our photography leaders. And then after that, on the 7th of November, we have Mr. Chris Breen and Helen Bryon talking about Baja again at 7:30. So please sign up for those if those are of interest.
So I have a question for you, Ben, just before we go.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would add based on your experience of both jaguars and puma watching out there?
Oh, I don't know. I think both the cats are absolutely incredible. Obviously, you know, you need to see both of them to really have an opinion on it. So yeah, come to both Chile and Brazil is what I would say. And I'm biased, so yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Well, shall we let these good people go and have a cuppa or a beer?
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm just getting the last polls in. Lovely. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for joining us, and yeah, have a great rest of your evening.